Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kate Alder from Irvine Valley College. We're going to give everyone a couple of minutes more to get here. So if you're getting yourself situated, getting your lunch out of your bag, I hope you're getting ready. It should be another exciting session today. So I'll be back with you in just a moment or two. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is Kate Alder, and welcome back to the Visual Thinking and Career Development Using Graphic Organizers webinars. This is session 2, Maps to Help Make the Important Connections. I'm Kate Alder from Irvine Valley College, and I'm going to be the tech support person for today's webinar as well as for the other webinars. So I'm just going to go through a couple of things real quickly. You should be seeing on your screen right now this slide that shows you some information about what you're going to be doing for audio. If you're using a computer headset, please make sure that your microphone is muted, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. If you've called in by a telephone, please use *6 on your telephone keypad in order to mute the microphone in your telephone. Whoops, excuse me. I clicked a little too quickly there. When you take a look at this control panel right here, the things that you want to pay attention to are that you have this green microphone, has a red line through it. If you don't have a microphone on your computer, you probably won't even see this option. But if you're plugged in with a headset or you're using a laptop or a webcam perhaps that has a microphone, you'll see that. You want to make sure that's muted. When you have questions, if you would please use this questions area to key in your question, and I will be monitoring the questions throughout the webinar. If you have a tech question, I'll answer it quickly, immediately to you only. But if you have a question for Kate Brooks, or if you want to share one of your success stories with Kate Brooks, then please also put that here in the question log, and I will hold those until the end of the presentation when Kate will be taking all the questions. So I hope that you have a very successful and enjoyable webinar today. And by the way, thank you to all of you who completed the survey for us. That was really useful information, and we'll be working to follow up on your feedback. So thanks again, and have a great day. I'm going to turn it over now to Rita Jones, and she'll get you going.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is Rita Jones, your facilitator. I'd like to ask Susan Coleman, I'd like to ask Susan Coleman to do a short recap from last week about the funding for the webinar series and what we hope to accomplish. Susan.
Greetings, career professionals. We're happy to have you with us today. We wanted to tell you that this series of webinars is funded by the Career and Work-Based Learning Connections to Professional Associations grant. It's an SB 70 funded grant from the Chancellor's Office. And this is part of the staff development portion of the grant that we are delivering. We did face-to-face last year with Kate Brooks. It went so well, and we said, how can we expand this to many others across the state, and came up with the idea of doing the webinars. So this is a continuation, and thank you for joining. Be sure and let us know your impressions and your ideas for additional staff development that will help you make your job easier and better.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Let me just mention a couple of things from last week. Kate and Susan both talked about how you shared at the end. I just want to emphasize that really makes the experience much richer to hear from those that have already been trained about how they're using the materials with their students. You'll see an example of that. If you were on the call last week, you should have received an email from me sharing a great SWOT resource. And we hope to continue adding your most promising practices to a page on our Ning social network. I will take a minute at the end of today's webinar to make sure you know how to link to Ning and know how to sign up. But today we're going to learn about wandering maps and vision boards, two of my personal favorites. And I will send the worksheets to you as we did this last time at the beginning of next week. Now, for those of you that have not had the pleasure of hearing Kate before, let me tell you just a little bit about her. She is a career coach and a counselor who has been in the field of career advising for over 20 years. She holds a master's degree in vocational rehabilitation and a doctorate in educational psychology from West Virginia University. She's the author of You Majored in What?, a career book for college students which uses a variety of visual thinking techniques to help students make important career decisions. In this series of webinars, Dr. Brooks will teach you the value of visual techniques and help you develop your own techniques for working with the many types of students you encounter. So with that, let me turn it over to Kate and enjoy the session.
Okay, thank you, Rita. I appreciate it. Greetings from Texas, and hang on one second. I have to just sort of click on a few things here and get them off of my screen. Alrighty. So we're going to do maps and vision boards today. And as Rita said, they're one of her favorites. They're actually one of my favorites, too. And I hope that, what I explained today will be clear to you. Several of you, or many of you, I guess, actually indicated that you would like to see more examples. So I've tried to put some examples in here, but I will warn you that I'm not big on giving a lot of examples because one of my concerns is sometimes when we look at too many examples, we start to get a preconceived idea of what it should look like. And I really would prefer that you try it out and not have a lot of preconceived ideas in your head so that you just get a lot more interesting, creative things that happen when you don't have a perfect model to look at. But I do hear you, and I will make sure that we've got examples. So I just want to quickly review, and hang on a second, I'm just having a little trouble with getting my slide. There we go. The goals of this series. For those of you who were with us last week, this is something I talked about last week, but I just want to make sure for anybody who's new, we're really just trying to introduce some visual techniques that you can apply to a variety of activities that you do. I know that some of you have one-on-one student roles, some of you do not. Maybe you do workshops or classes. Some of you may have a completely different role at your school. And so I encourage you to be creative. They always say that creativity is connecting the unconnected. So if you're not quite sure how these might apply to what you do, I encourage you to think about that and see if there are some times when you could apply this. I also encourage you to be creative, to go way above and beyond what I present for you and look for other ways to do this. And finally, this is a very action-oriented approach that I like because I think it helps you, if you're working with clients, they take a much more active role. And in terms of the advantages of visual thinking, the quote I really like is this comment that it's easier to organize your thoughts if you can see them. We all have thoughts rolling around in our head and they bounce all over the place, and if you're like me, you've got all these thoughts and you walk into a room to take care of whatever you were thinking of, and then you get in the room and it's like, oh, why am I here? And so, you know, if I'd just written it down, I'd probably remember why I was there. So visual thinking is just great to help us organize and clarify thoughts. It also can reduce the complexity of all the things in your head. You do see relationships more easily, and problem solving is easier with visual enhancements. Also just retaining information. And one of the things I really like for those of us in this field is it's cheap. It does not cost much money to do this. And I don't know about you, but I am always looking for inexpensive ways to do things. And then finally, and this is really great, after a session with students or a student at a time, they actually have something to walk out of the session with. It isn't just a conversation. They have a piece of paper that they walk out with, and it's something they can refer back to. So now today, last week we talked about squares and rectangles, and I hope that was helpful. And this time now we're going to talk about maps. And maps are just a really nice way, I think, to show relationships between things, to connect the dots, so to speak. I always think of elementary school when you had those little coloring books that would have dots with the numbers next to them, and you would connect the number on the dots, and then all of a sudden you'd end up with a picture of a horse. And to me, that's what maps do. They help our students connect the dots. And also they can uncover hidden things that the student might not even be thinking about consciously. And so one of the leaders in the field of mapping is a guy by the name of Tony Buzan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's B-U-Z-A-N, and I have an image up there of one of his books called Mind Maps at Work. He has probably 15, maybe 20 books out there, and you might want to check your library because they probably have some, and you certainly can buy them on Amazon and places like that. Tony Buzan has a very specific system for doing these mind maps. My system's a little different, but I thought I would start and show you his because you might find his more appealing than mine. So, and certainly mind mapping is a lot of fun to do regardless of whose system you use. And basically the thing about mind maps is they really are good for helping students focus. You know, if you're trying to get them to think about a particular issue or a topic, a mind map can be a great way to organize it and just be able to sort of get a concrete picture of what it is that they're trying to do. And as I mentioned, maps are very good for seeing relationships, and you really can get the order of an idea or themes or concepts. So it's a way of making parts connect. And I want to show you an example here, and this comes from Tony Buzan's own website. His system for mapping is very logical and very orderly. So for a creative visual technique, he actually incorporates a lot of order into it. Sometimes mapping can be a little crazy, and quite frankly, mine tend to be a little chaotic and crazy. But if you're kind of a person who likes a little more order and the kind of chaos of my maps is making you a little crazy, you might like Tony Buzan's system. Because let's just take a look at this particular example. This is one of his maps, and as you can see, apparently this was a map of his strengths, or maybe it's about his career or about himself. And so what he did was he put a picture of himself in the center, and then he has these lines going out. And notice how he uses colors. He loves to use colors, and he picks a different color for each topic area. And as you can see, he has things like the fact that he's an author, and then he has branches that go out from that and start to explain the various things he has written. He's got a thing for educator, and then you notice he's broken it into adults and children. And presumably, you know, this map could go on forever. He could keep adding branches and extending that out. And if you look, he has a section at the bottom that's yellow. It's called media, and then he has different examples of where he's done various types of media, articles, and books and things. On the left, he has achievements, and he has, of course, creating mind mapping as one of his achievements. He's not actually the creator of mind mapping. It was done long before he came along, but he certainly is the person who has put it into a system and made it very organized. But I was looking at this, and again, now this is an example, and you might look at it and go, well, that's not really career, or I'm not sure what I'd do with that. But think about it if you ran a workshop for your students and you were trying to get at their strengths. Now, you could just say, let's all get out a piece of paper and everybody write down your top 5 strengths or whatever. Or you could say, I'd like you to do a mind map, and you could sort of show them the basics of how to do one without too much prompting, and then have them, you know, if they don't have a picture of themselves, most of us don't carry that around, but they could draw a stick figure or some sort of drawing of themselves in the center, and then you have them draw lines out from there, and maybe if we're doing strengths, they might put a strength as creativity, okay? So that might be on one of their branches. And then what you would ask them to do is, well, let's think of some examples of that, and then have them draw branches where they start to explain what that means. So they might have a branch that says, I write poetry or something like that. And the idea is this is a visual representation. It's a way of kind of helping them organize the information in their head, but it's also sort of pretty, and it's something they could put up and remind themselves. So if I have an interview coming up, I want to grab this mind map and glance at it for a few minutes. And it might remind me, oh, I've got to remember to tell the employer about this and this and this. So it's just a really nice visual way of looking at this. Now, another thing you could do is instead of saying strengths, your prompt could be map yourself, what's important to you, or who are you. It could be as simple as that. I want you to do a mind map of who you are. And then see what pops, because this, again, is what I like about mapping. You get this hidden stuff. If my prompt is your strengths, well, I'm going to get their strengths, and that may work in some settings. But if I just say, who are you, it might be really interesting to see what they choose to put on those branches. Like somebody might do creative or put their strengths, but somebody else might write father, and then they might describe the roles they play there. Or, you know, they may put something that has, maybe they might put student, and they might talk about the roles they play there. So it's just, again, mapping reveals things that they might not consciously say. So it's, as you can see, it's pretty, and it's a simple way to do it. And that does not require a lot of art. Now, he's put some pictures and things on there, but you don't need to. And, you know, I have a bin of colored pens and things, but a lot of my students do all their maps in pencil. Or one color pen. So color's great, but don't burden yourself that you have to use lots and lots of color. So some ways to use maps. These are and I'm going to, the next slide is actually a little template. For those of you who like templates and like it a little structured, Buzan is very good for that. He's big on structuring them. And so I'm going to kind of go back and forth between these two slides and show you what I mean. So for instance, one way to use a map would be to write a paper or a cover letter. And I used to work with students who had learning disabilities and or attention deficit disorder, and I found mapping to be really helpful for those students because they often are very creative thinkers. They don't necessarily think logically and in order. So if they're having to work on a paper, and the traditional way would be that you would make an outline, they have trouble with outlines because outlines immediately force you into a structure, and you have to, whereas the mapping doesn't force you into that structure. Let's take a look here. I'm going to move it forward. This is a sample of a template for mind mapping if you want to use, and there is software out there. If you Google mind mapping software, there's a lot that's in the public domain that you can just download for free. There's also a company called Inspiration that makes mind mapping software, and I think if you get the educator's rate, it's not all that expensive. And I think that that you might want to purchase that. It might be helpful. But the template basically gives you a structure. So let's say, I mentioned that a paper is a way to go. If you're helping a student, maybe they're writing an essay for getting into college. And so you want to help them with that. So this mind map template, you could start in the center and put me, or their name in the center. And then you can put around that, like, what are the, now this template happens to have 4 squares, as you can see, that come out from that main one. So maybe you could say, well, let's think of 4 main points you want to tell the admissions people about you, or, or the answer to that particular admissions question. And so they can put a word or 2 in there that illustrates that point. And then as you can see, then you can say, well, what would be an example? And then they could fill that in at the next level. So the idea is they can jump back and forth. And because it's a template, if I have my 4 categories there, and one of the things I'm going to talk about is the summer I volunteered at a camp. And then maybe one of the other blocks that I'm going to be sure to put in this essay was how I overcame this problem I had. And so those are my categories, but all of a sudden in my brain I'm like, oh wait, I need to mention this other thing. Well, there's a place here to be able to do it. You can jump back and forth. So it's very nice for organizing a paper or any kind of an essay, anything like that. And let me go back here. Once again, I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my, whoops, now we're really going wrong. All right, there we go. Okay, so preparing for an interview, again, if you look at that particular map, here you go. You could put down the 4 main points you want to make in an interview. It's almost like a SWOT analysis if you think about it. You could do strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as each of your 4 things there, and then start mapping it out that way, particularly if you like the map diagram better than you like the squares from last week's SWOT. Analyzing your strengths. you know, career options. You could put 4 career options. And again, we're not limited to 4. It's just that template has 4. You certainly can add more. But again, it's just a way of organizing information, and it allows you to ask them questions that help get at that. And goal setting could be another thing. I used to use it studying for a test all the time with students. Again, working with some of the special needs students that I was working with, I would have them put down, for instance, everything they knew. Like if they were taking a test and it was on the Civil War, I might have them put the North and the South maybe as 2 blocks. And then they'd have to fill in what they knew about the North or what they know about the South and who were the leaders and all of that. And we'd start to figure out what they knew and what they didn't know. So it's very good for that. So think about if you use this for career choices. You could put 2 or 3 or 4 different career choices that they might be making. And then once again, have them fill in information related to that. Lifelines are another way to do maps, and that's simply where you start at the left side of the paper and you draw a line to the right side. And so the left side is birth, and then the far right is where you are, or you could project out into the future as far as you want. And what I have people do is make notes of significant points in their life. They might want to draw a little plus sign at some place where things went really well, and maybe there was a little minus, or they put some event that wasn't so much fun. But they can actually do sort of a lifeline. An exercise I did probably 20 years ago. We had some students that we were training to work in our office, and we wanted to sort of as peer counselors, and we wanted to make them more aware of career issues and things. So we had them do a career lifeline. And of course they were only like 22 years old, so they didn't have a whole lot of life to write about, but we had them do every job you've ever had. And so they created this lifeline with kind of ups and downs. So sometimes they'd have the summer I worked at Dairy Queen, and that would be kind of a dip in the thing, but then they would say, well, last summer I did an internship. And they might even go back to when they were 4 years old and they, you know, were in charge of feeding the cat. But the idea is it was a fun way to have them show each other all the different jobs or careers they had had. And then finally, just for fun, New Year's resolutions. You know, so many of us make a list of things. You know, either it's a to-do list or these are all the things I want to accomplish. Well, what if you did it as a map, and you put your 4 main resolutions there, and then you worked out from there and started putting some of the steps to get there? Or like, for instance, let's look at the right there. Let's say you go to the right and you say, one of my goals is to eat healthier this year. Maybe up top left, as you move up there, maybe you could say one of the reasons you want to eat healthier is sort of for fitness or whatever. And so you might put some more things about that. And maybe in the other block, you might want to say you want to eat healthier because you have a goal to reach for your cholesterol level or something like that. So the idea is you just adapt this any way that works for you. I hope I'm kind of making that clear, that there is no right or wrong, and there's so many different ways to use these that I just encourage you to think about that. Okay, this one's just for fun. I found this on Google Images. If you just go into Google, type mind map, and then click on images, there's a whole bunch of these, and also Flickr has them on Creative Commons, and I have the address down there for you. There's somebody, Jean-Louis Zimmerman, who does these, and he's got like 20 of them, and they're wonderful. This one's called Abundant Energy, and it's just kind of fun to look at. Now, I don't know if anybody, I certainly don't have enough artistic talent to do that one, but on the left side he has enhancing energy, and on the right he has things that lower his energy level. And it's just kind of fun to read all the different things that either give him energy or that take it away, and what depletes it and what keeps it going. And again, the thing is you could make a list. You could just write a list of the things that give you energy or the things that deplete it. But this is more fun, I think, and it's more fun to look at. Wouldn't you love to have that, you know, on your mirror or something every day to just remind you about what gives you energy versus what takes it away? It's just a lot more fun than a list. So, okay, so I want to quickly move into the type of map that I do, which I call it a wandering map, and it is based on a phrase, the network of possible wanderings, from Dr. Herbert Simon. And basically Dr. Simon, who is the gentleman who created artificial intelligence, he was asked at one point, how did he come up with artificial intelligence? How did his team develop that? And it turned out that he had doctorates in psychology, computer science, and economics. And he basically said because he knew all this information from those fields, he had this network of possible wanderings in his brain that he could move around to. And so by having this knowledge about these multiple fields, he created what he called sort of this overarching lattice work. And so he was able to make new connections and come up with ideas that other people didn't do because of how he could connect. And as they say, it uncovers patterns that are lost to most people. So what I do is, in creating this wandering map, and I apologize, that print is a little small. I hope you're doing this on a screen, I have a little screen. I'm hoping you're all seeing this on a much bigger screen. And this is in my book, so it's very easy to find. All I did was copy this out of the book. But basically, to do the wandering map exercise, I do this. It takes about 15-20 minutes. I do this in workshops. I do it one-on-one, almost any situation where somebody is coming in and they're really starting the career exploration process. And that could mean they're a brand new, like a first-year student, or it could mean they're a senior who hasn't done a whole lot yet, or a second-year student, or they might be an adult who maybe is transitioning to a whole new career field. And basically, to create the wandering map, I give them a piece of paper, legal-sized paper. I encourage them to just do a brain dump, put everything on the paper they've ever done, and anything that's interesting to them. Don't try to organize it. Don't try to make sense of it. Just put it on the paper and see what sort of shows up. And I give them a list of prompts, which I think Rita has a copy of, and you probably got it in training last year, but for those of you who didn't get it, Rita, I think, has the prompt list. But these are some of the categories you can tell them to consider. You might want to put down classes you enjoy, or theories, or honors you've received, favorite memories, things like that. And so what they do is they create, now this is obviously done on a computer, and most of the time I have them do it by hand. But this is basically what one might start to look like. So they've got themselves in the center, and they've put things like, oh, I was an English major, and I love my dogs, and my Mentalist is my favorite TV show, and I've got a sister who has cerebral palsy, and I like to play tennis, and I've been working at fast food jobs, and I like to do scrapbooks, and I took a criminal justice class that I really liked, and I'm this killer poker player. Do you see the mess? Do you see the chaos? Now they're looking at that, and they're going, this doesn't make any sense. And so that's how the wandering map starts. The next step is you have them start to put together some obvious connections in their lives. So maybe it's jobs they've had, or maybe you'll see activities they've done in high school, things like that. So very simple connections. Adolescent psych class, criminal justice class. Those are two classes. Now, I did this on Word, and I just kind of used a straight line. Obviously, they would draw probably squiggly lines to get there, and you can draw all around it. You don't need to use these straight lines like I have. And maybe they'd connect, oh, summer camp counselor, fast food. Those are two jobs. And they might say, well, tennis and poker. Those are two kind of fun activities. So these are just very logical connections, and that's how most people see connections. And I like to put that in and show them that, because I think it's just a good way for them to sort of logically look at it. But then here's the beauty of the wandering map. What we want to do now is let's go above those kind of obvious connections, and let's look for threads or themes that start to cut across the boundaries. Is there something that they've been doing their whole life, and they've just been doing it in different ways? And by the way, there's no way for you to do that. Your client has to do that, because they're the only ones that know the story. I mean, let me go back a second here. Summer camp counselor could mean anything. They might have had a wonderful experience. They might have had a horrible experience. You don't know, so you can't make the connections for them unless you can get them to tell you the story. So so some threads and themes, and again, Rita can share this with you, are things like, are all my things alone? Am I doing a lot of things alone, or am I doing them with others? Is it hobbies? Is it indoors or outdoors? Maybe detail and follow through is something that I clearly do, or maybe I'm a really good problem solver. So you start to look for these different themes. Now this time my lines are really different. Now I've used some different colored lines. Again, sorry for the very straight lines. I'm not the best artist here. But for instance, now instead of connecting that psych class just to the class, I'm actually connecting, well, the psych class was interesting, and I like combining what I learned about adolescent psychology with what I learned in my criminal justice class. And then that summer I was a camp counselor. It was a camp for troubled youth. And one of the things I liked doing was helping them write poetry as a way of expressing themselves. So now do you see there's a whole different theme that has now showed up, and it's maybe this interest in helping troubled youth. Or let's look at like Girl Scout badges. You know, maybe this person earned a lot of Girl Scout badges. And they also have about their dogs and tennis. And you sit down and you talk to them a little bit about these different things, and all of a sudden you realize that, well, what these have in common is they show patience and goals and determination. If you've ever tried to teach a dog anything, I suppose it'd be worse if it was cat training, but if you've ever tried to train an animal, you know how much patience that requires, and you got to kind of be determined. And so, you know, apparently to be the master of Girl Scout badges, that requires that too. And then look toward the bottom. The sister with cerebral palsy, the mentalist and killer poker player. Well, you might not think those have anything in common, except that they like to solve problems, they like to think strategically, they like mysteries, and so if you think about it, poker is a lot of strategy, and it's reading the other person, psyching them out, and so on. And with the sister, the story that might come out is, well, we always had these challenges of how to help her learn certain things or do certain things because she couldn't do it the traditional way. So we had to get creative and try to think of another way around this. How could we fix this? So what we're doing now is we're going and we're finding all these themes that show up in very diverse ways in their lives, and they may not even be aware of those themes. So that's sort of the third level of analyzing the wandering map. And I have this one, again, I know you all want examples, but this is just one that I love that a student of mine created. This was a very quiet student who was he's a Hispanic student who is majoring in Asian studies. And when I first spoke with him, he basically just said, oh, I guess, you know, I might teach English as a second language. I don't really know what I'm good at. And then he drew this. And it was just a fascinating way. And again, I can't interpret this because it's his map. I don't know what it all means. But I can sit down with him and I can get him to tell me stories about all these different things, and then I can help him when he starts telling these stories. I can help him find the themes, although you don't usually have to. They usually can find their own themes. So that actually sort of shows you how the wandering map works. And basically, like I said, you start with a piece of paper and you just tell them to do a brain dump. Dump everything that's important about your life down on this piece of paper. And most of my maps are just words. This one I'm showing you has all these cute little drawings, but most students just put words down. Encourage them to do short little bursts of words, kind of like what we had back here. You know, adolescent psych class, summer in France, tennis. They don't need to write a lot. As long as it means something to them, that's all that matters. And so they've now got this map with these words, and now you help them. Remember the connect the dots, the old thing where the horse picture appears? They won't get a picture of a horse, but they might get some really interesting themes and threads that will help them either identify strengths to talk to an employer about, or it might help them figure out career paths even. You know, this is clearly starting to outline a possible career path for this student. So that's the basics of mapping. And I encourage you to take a look at Tony Buzan's stuff. As you can see, mine are different. The maps that I create do not look like the maps that Tony Buzan has. His are much more structured. So I encourage you to go with what you like and play with both models and see what works best for you. So the other thing I want to talk about is vision boards. And, you know, I threw in the word collages because, I don't know, I've been doing these for many, many years. I've always just called them a collage. Somewhere along the way we got very fancy and started calling them vision boards, and that's fine. I want to mention vision boards, I think get mentioned in the movie The Secret, and this is not New Age. This is not anything mystical or unique or anything. It's really just another method for expressing ideas and expressing vision and goals and all of that. And as you can see, that's how vision boards tend to start out, very, very messy. And eventually you make sense of them. But the thing to do with vision boards, and actually I'm going to jump ahead here, is let me just go into supplies. You need a poster board or some sort of a background that people can work from. Get a stack of magazines, and I encourage that you pick all kinds of magazines so that there's a variety. You need a good quality of glue or glue stick. Do not use Elmer's glue when you're putting these together because Elmer's is too thin and watery. It will cause all the magazine images to get little wrinkles. I have a little picture there of a glue called Yes Glue. Yes Glue is wonderful. I have tons of that in my art craft room. You can buy it at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or any kind of art supply store will have Yes Glue. It's just very good quality. It's very thick. It's kind of like the paste you had back in elementary school, but I don't think you can eat it the way we used to eat the paste in elementary school. But it's a thicker thing, and it will not cause your magazine to wrinkle. It'll be much, much nicer. And then the other thing to have are markers and glitter and stickers and things like that. So you've got your stuff. And basically give the students or whoever you're working with some of these magazines and just tell them to go through the magazines and look for words and pictures and things that inspire them. And the idea is that you're just collecting images that speak to you. And you can use vision boards with a variety of purposes, or you can have one that's just kind of whatever. And so let me show you. So basically what you want to do is you create the vision board by going through the magazines. You tear out whatever appeals, pictures, words, and all of that. And then once you've got them all out, kind of like that messy image I showed you originally, you start laying them out. And you see what makes sense, and you can put them in order, you can glue them down, and then you can also write on it, you can draw lines, you can write words, you know, anything you want. And when you're doing this, there are different types of vision boards that you can create, and one is sort of goal-directed. That's where you say, okay, I'm going to create a vision board about my plans to go to college. And now I'm going to go through these magazines and I'm going to pull all the images that have to do with what I want to accomplish when I'm in college or what I want to have happen. And so that's a goal-directed board. Then there's the one called See What Shows Up board, which is very flexible, and I really advocate that one. I think that's a lot of fun. It's a little scarier going into it because you're sort of going, I don't know what I'm going to do. But what happens is you just look for pictures and words that speak to you with no rhyme or reason, and it's amazing what the board comes up with. And then the last is another type you can have as sort of a theme. So it might be a concept like my career goals or my ideal life or New Year's resolutions again. And then you pick images that fit that theme. I went to a vision board session about a month ago. I try to take these classes on visual thinking as much as I do them because I learn more every time I'm a student. And the vision board when I went to, I almost didn't go because I didn't have a plan. And I thought, I don't have anything I want to really diagram. I don't know. But I got there and I just started going through magazines, and I'm looking at my board right now as I'm talking to you. And you know, it was fascinating what showed up. Somewhere in the magazine I found a picture of Dublin, and I absolutely love Dublin and I love Ireland, and I thought, oh, I need to go back. So I clipped that picture, and then I clipped a picture of some guitars because I like to play music. And then I saw this picture, this gorgeous picture of a field of, or boxes of blueberries. And I had no idea what I was going to do with it, but it was just pretty. There's nothing prettier than like 1,000 blueberries in a picture. And so I cut that out, and I had a picture of a butterfly. And then as I started to put it all together, I suddenly realized, you know what I have? I have pictures of things I want to put back in my life. So travel is something I haven't done in a while. I've done a lot of travel for business, and I suddenly realized I really need to take a vacation, and maybe I should go back to Ireland. And then I realized the blueberries, to me, symbolized the need to eat healthier this year. I want to do more of that. And then the guitars I had picked out, well, I just want to spend more time with my music than I've been doing lately. And you suddenly realize that your brain was working just fine. As you're sitting through the magazine going, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here, your brain does, and it's picking up those images. And so what I have here is this comes also from Flickr Creative Commons, and I have the link down there. But basically there's an example of a vision board that somebody created, and she's got things on there like the value of the poetic me, and she's got my babies, and then she's got photos there. She's got embrace each day, and I don't know what her purpose was in creating that board. I don't know if she had one in mind or not, but it's just that's a very cool example. And here's another one, and again, I don't know the purpose of this because it was just a picture, but if you see, she's got the word survivor right there in the middle. So I suspect it was a board that maybe they were working on health things, or who knows, life changes. And clearly she has some things about the future. She's got the future according to, and she has shake up and goodbye butterflies, and it's clear that maybe this person, she's got smile, is going into maybe a risky situation, or they're having to take a chance and do some things, and so she's reminding herself that she's a survivor and that no matter what happens, she's going to come out ahead. And I love the little quote in the corner where she says, get the message, so just kind of a reminder to herself. So let me go back here just for a second, and I actually want to go back to this slide. Yeah. So the idea is with these vision boards, and you have them up, you can surround yourself with successful images. I took this vision board that I created a couple weeks ago, and I actually put it up on my mirror, and I just love it. I walk by it sometimes in the morning, and I look at it, and it just reminds me, this is what I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing it. So you want to find these words that are going to motivate or inspire you, and you're going to maybe you'll want to have a board that's about things you want to do this year, skills you want to learn, or experiences you want to have, any kind of image of your life or what's important to you, and then ultimately developing the vision and the steps to get there. This is something that is just so easy to do. I mean, let's face it, glue magazines and a piece of paper. How hard can it be? And I think it sometimes people are in the midst of it and they're thinking, this is silly, and this looks like a third grade project. And I have to admit, mine does not look like a professional artist did it by any means. But you get it home and you look at it, and all of a sudden it's like, that's pretty cool. So these are the basics of vision boards and the mapping, and it is exactly 40 minutes past the hour, and I promised that that's when I would stop. And so I think, Kate Alder, I'm going to turn it back to you, and we'll do questions or whatever.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kate. That was a wonderful and very interesting presentation. I have one question already. Someone's asking, how long does it usually take for these stories to come out of conversations with the student, especially for quiet students or ones with low self-esteem?
That's a great question. If you're dealing, here's how I do it. If I'm doing this in a group workshop, which is how I do most of my mapping stuff, I walk around from desk to desk, and I talk personally to the student as they're working on it, and I try to keep it pretty folksy and low-key, and I'll just say to them, I'll look at their map and I'll say, oh, tell me about this, and whatever item they've put down. And then they'll say something, and again, even if they're shy or whatever, they're just talking to me, and the rest of the class is working on the map. They're not paying any attention. And I'll try to, if I hear something in their story, I'll try to pull on a strength, and I'll try to say something like, oh, well, it sounds like you're really good at, or it sounds like you're really creative or whatever. And then we'll look, I'll say, is that showing up anywhere else? And then we look at the map. And I often find that just that much of a prompt frees up their mind, frees up their brain a little bit to find more things on their own. And I have had students who say, I don't see any connections. I can't see anything. And what I'll tend to do if they tell me that is I'll say, would you mind if I show yours to the group and we see if any of us can find any connections? And 9 times out of 10, again, they're absolutely fine with that. And of course, I work at a very large university, and my students are so not used to getting individual attention. They're used to being a number, quite frankly. And so when they get in a class where somebody actually acknowledges them and pays attention to them, they seem to really enjoy it. So I haven't found it to be a problem, and I'm always very careful to ask permission before I ever use them as an example or anything like that. And you know, I just, to be honest, I've never had a student say no, but I suppose it could happen.
Anything can happen, right? The other question is, someone wants to know, actually several people have asked this question, about when the webinar is going to be available for review and being able to access the PowerPoints. And we are recording all these webinars, and they will be posted as soon as they're available for you to view online. Rita will be notifying all of you, and in a couple of minutes we're going to turn the conversation over to Rita, and she's going to talk a little bit about the Ning, which is where you'll be able to find some of the other resources. I do have another question coming in. I wanted to ask whether careercafe.ning is a good place to connect with other career coaches. I'm going to say yes, and Rita's going to talk about Ning in just a minute. This person says, I'm in the process of developing my own routine as a career coach and could use some support. So this came from someone who's logged in as Collegement Advising. So I'm just going to say to you then, yeah, for sure, you're going to want to check out the Ning, and Rita's going to talk about that in just a minute. Someone has written in saying they had an issue with a student with an extremely troubled past, and she included only examples of knives and guns and needles. She said that there was nothing positive in her life. I want to cry just reading this. What to do with this student? Kate, what do you say?
Okay. Well, clearly you have an issue there that at least in theory, and hopefully you could refer them to a counselor in a counseling center, because you might be dealing with depression there. Sometimes that's just adolescent angst, but my guess is that might be a much more serious situation. But you know, the quote that I love from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who writes a lot about mindfulness, he has this wonderful quote. He says, if you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong. And so I like to say that to students, and I just say, you know, you're breathing. And you're sitting here in this room, and you're showing me a history that is very different from my history. And so one of the things I would do is I would ask them to tell me a little bit more about that. But my focus would be on, how do you survive? How do you get, you're in school, really? You deal with guns and knives and all this on a daily basis at home, and you're here in school. Tell me why you're here. You know, how did you get out of that, or how do you deal with it? So I would be constantly focusing on their strengths and getting them to focus on how smart they are, and how you know, how brilliant it was for them not to get caught up in that world and to try to make their lives better. And even pose the question, now, is this a world you want to leave, or do you feel that you need to go back to it for some reason? And, you know, I would be asking some of those things, but I always go for what's the positive in it. And even when it looks horrible, if they're breathing, there's more right than wrong. So help them find out what's right.
I like that statement too. If you're breathing, there's more that's right than wrong. And who did you say that was?
It's Jon Kabat-Zinn.
Jon Kabat-Zinn.
-ZINN.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. Well, I don't have any more questions coming in. So, Kate, do you have any last comment that you wanted to make before we turn it over to Rita?
No, I'm rather technically challenged, but I will see if there's a way I can take a picture of the map that I made, of the vision board that I made a few weeks ago. Like I said, it is definitely not a work of art, but it might give you some ideas. And I encourage you all to give this a try. Make some maps, or you know, either the vision board or some maps, and share them with Rita so that we can all see.
Wonderful. That would be great to see. And one more question came in before I turn it back to Rita. How do you deal with those who are not as open to this type of exploration, the ones that need an immediate job for survival?
Yeah. Well, you know, again, that's part of it, is knowing the situation. If you've got somebody who is under the gun and they have to have a job tomorrow, you may not want to take the time to do some of these visual things. They may be better off making lists and coming up with very tangible things and activities they can do. A lot of these activities come more under the guise of exploration. And so I think you do have to be sensitive to the needs. But it doesn't mean you can't use, for instance, a SWOT analysis or some of those. Those would probably be better to use with somebody who's, you know, I've got to have a job by tomorrow kind of thing. The vision boards and that sort of stuff, that might not be the best activity for them. Again, you just have to sort of think through what's the best way to work with this person, what's going to work the best here.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Kate Brooks. I'm going to turn it over
you.
now to Rita Jones so she can. Oh, somebody wants to know, what is the T in SWOT analysis? It's threats.
Threats.
Right. So I'm going to turn this back over to Rita Jones now, and Kate will be hearing from you again next week. So more questions are coming in, but I'll try to go ahead and email them to you, Kate. Maybe we can get some answers back for people. Okay. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me show my screen. All right. This is Rita back. Thank you, Kate. I tell you, I learn something new every time I hear this. It's always very thought-provoking. How fun. Anyway, thanks to all of you for your questions and the sharing part. And what I want to tell you about just for a minute here is to make sure all of you know about our NING, our social network, which is for career professionals who are part of our California Community College system. So I want to point out that this is the site. I'm going to show you the address on a slide in just a minute. But this is the home page of the NING network. It's obviously much longer than this. But all of the materials for this webinar series, the most promising practices, we're starting a whole sheet there where we'll be adding to that and you'll be adding to that so you can share with your colleague what works and what types of things you've been doing with these visual techniques. All of that is housed here on the NING. And I will be periodically sending you a broadcast or an email alert that'll tell you, that'll have a link to it and tell you what's there. So watch for that. I'm hoping most of you that were on the call last week, let me see why, there, were on the call last week would have gotten this sample that Jen Burlington from Mount San Jacinto College and her colleagues have shared with us. It's a great PowerPoint on using SWOT to be able to help undecided students, SWOT away career indecisiveness, and it was a really nice one, and thank you, Jen, for sharing that. So remember, on the NING, all of those here, let me go back a slide, all on the bottom right, there'll be a section in there, you'll be able to find it, I'll link you to it, where we're going to be housing those resources. So the web address then is www.ca for California, cacareercafe.ning.com. That's where you'll go. It's a very simple sign-in process. If you're confused at all about how to sign up, if you go to the bottom of the page, there's a short video that will explain that to you. So we hope that you'll check us out. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Kate next week's going to talk about cluster diagrams, and there's a really neat activity called Possible Lives. If you haven't heard about that, that one's part of going to be part of that webinar. So we will be sending you the follow-up materials at the beginning of next week that have to do with explaining the wandering map and the material and the types and the vision boards that Kate talked about today. So thank you all for attending. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you, Rita. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thanks again.